Hello and welcome to another episode of Hope, Hearing Other People's Experiences. I'm Georgie and today I'm joined by the wonderful, very impressive, to me anyway, Dr. Chantelle Jessica Lewis. Hello, how are you?
Hi Georgie, I'm good and it's really great to be here.
So from what I gather, you are a Black feminist intellectual whose research is situated at the intersections of race and class, gender studies, social theory, queer theory, politics, and family studies. So there is going to be quite a lot to unpack here. But first of all, I'd just like to ask you to tell me a little bit about yourself and how you got to be here today.
Thanks so much, Georgie. And that kind of introduction from my bio kind of reminds me that I need to kind of not downplay the academic, but be less academic-y because it's just a bit kind of high and mighty. Like, oh, I'm an expert on this, expert on that. I'm not really an expert on anything. I'm just curious. I'm curious about my own life, other people's lives, social lives. I'm interested in social inequality and I'm interested in trying to find ways to make a difference, or else I always kind of have been. But hearing you kind of speak back to me the things that I'm saying that I'm the expert on, I'm like, God, I've got to take myself less seriously.
Do you know what, though? Like, for me, as someone who's interviewing you, and I'm genuinely curious because you have areas of knowledge that I really want to extract from you. So when I was reading up on you and I watched a few interviews with you and I listened to her amazing podcast, Surviving Society, is that right?
Yes, Surviving Society.
Yes. I really was interested in the very specific neurodivergence ideas you have about, like, obviously I'm a woman with ADHD. Mm-hmm. I wasn't diagnosed until I was about 34.
Wow, yeah.
So, yeah, I guess, is there a definitive connection between that and developing addiction in adulthood?
Right, we're straight onto it.
I kind of want to know.
Good. Yeah, straight onto it. Neurodivergence and addiction. So, first of all, just to say, Georgie, I'm really sorry that you only got your diagnosis at 34. I can't imagine. Well, I can imagine, but equally, I think it's really important to make space for people, particularly women, who get their diagnoses in adult life and so late, because so much of our life then begins to make sense. Mm-hmm. So much of our childhood begins to make sense, but equally we can't get that time back. So I just want to say I'm really sorry that it took so long for you to get your diagnosis. That being said, I do feel like there's a kind of feminist revolution amongst the kind of neurodiversity community, and where we're seeing so many women kind of speak to their experience, their very particular experiences of managing the combination of like ableism, disability and neurodiversity. And I think it's a really exciting time because we have so many different outlets for us to talk about these things in community, whether that's on podcasts, whether that's on social media, online, blogs, groups. Like, it's such a important time, I think, for women and neurodiversity. That being said, again, like similar to you, I was diagnosed when I was 24. It wasn't picked up until a lot later for me. So I have ADHD, I'm dyspraxic and I'm dyslexic. And I think that when we look at addiction, and I think we're going to have a more kind of holistic and wider conversation about addiction more broadly, but just taking neurodiversity and addiction, or ADHD and addiction specifically, there are a lot of experiences that I had, or a lot of traumas that I went through, that I think, had I been able to make the connection between myself and ADHD a lot earlier, perhaps my addictive tendencies wouldn't have taken over such big parts of my life. So yeah, I think that for me, like, again, similar to you as an ADHDer and as a woman, like, understanding addiction with that is essential. One thing that I think that I'll say before we carry on about ADHD that's really interesting, and drawing on some amazing an amazing physician called Gabor Mate, who writes about addiction, ADHD, healing work, a real like kind of hero of mine actually, and someone that's really helped me to understand myself. What we have to remember about ADHD is there's very few biological and genetic markers of it. It's very much a socially formulated and conditioned like aspect of our behaviours, our lives. But there's one thing that we do tend to have in common is that we have a kind of hyper oversensitivity. And like I don't use those words in a kind of in a negative way, because sometimes I think words like oversensitivity or hypersensitivity are used towards women to kind of degrade us or make us seem like irrational. I don't mean it like that. I mean it in the way of like, I take myself, for example, like I have a deep empathy for people and people's lived experiences, so much so that like I can come hyper enmeshed in someone else's experience. I want to help them make things better. Like that's the kind of sensitivity that we're talking about that we know is susceptible for ADHDers. Now, that being said, bring that in with addiction, we can see how concoctions can come together in how we relate to other people, how we relate to our lives, our worlds, our childhoods, and how that become quite messy.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting because, when I was diagnosed, like you said, everything fell into place, everything made sense. And, being told that you're lazy and you don't care and you're a mess all your life is kind of traumatic, right?
Yeah.
So I'm sure that Gabor Mate would have a lot to say about that.
Yeah.
I mean, they showed us loads of videos of him while I was in rehab, and I thought, wow, this guy's amazing. So I'm fangirling him.
We love Gabor Mate, honestly.
Yes,
honestly.
Gabor. We should get a poster of him right here. So thank you for answering that. Also, you're very interested, as am I, in the other factors that can come in. So, there's race inequality, there's class, there's gender.
Yeah.
And in your experience, what do you think the connection between being from a certain ethnic background versus, white, me, white, could you talk about the experience of a woman of colour, for instance, because I will never understand. So I'd like to know.
Yeah, no, thank you so much for that, Georgie. I think, kind of looking at disability or looking at neurodiversity from an intersectional approach is really important. I'm using intersectional here in the way that kind of Black feminists want us to look at it, in that we look at kind of how race, class and gender, how they create a experience which is very particular and specific. For example, we take the experiences of Black girls and Black boys in the English education system. Like, we know that they have very different, or tend to have very different but similar experiences, particularly when it comes to neurodiversity. So in the case of Black boys, we know that there is a lot more kind of surveillance, racism and diagnosis from an early age. And I think there's much to say about how young people are when they get diagnosed. I still haven't really made my mind up on where I sit on that. But I think Black boys being positioned as inherently naughty and inherently disruptive, inherently criminal, is something that can follow them throughout their entirety of their lives. And you bring into the mix neurodiversity or ADHD, then we know that Black boys are systematically overrepresented in pupil referral units. They're overrepresented as so-called school refusers. They're overrepresented in suspensions and in the school to prison pipeline. And we know so much of this comes from the inherent racism, institutional racism that we find across the entirety of the English education system. Now, when it comes to Black girls, and I think that you can draw on some similarities with other ethnic groups as well, we tend to see a kind of, things look a bit different. So Black girls will, at times, historically and in contemporary society as well, be forgotten or ignored or adultified. And it often means that kind of lack of care or that lack of kind of understanding of what they're managing and negotiating in school is not really given the attention that it needs. And again, they're experiencing a kind of different racism where their lived experiences are stereotyped against single parents, against old and tired tropes around blackness and womanhood. And yeah, what we know is that when it comes to not being diagnosed or getting adult diagnosis, that black girls and black women are overrepresented in that group. So we've got these two really stark experiences. My very good friend and colleague, Professor Jason Arday, we've just finished writing a book called We See Things They'll Never See, Love, Hope and Neurodiversity, and it's out next autumn.
Ooh.
Any Oasis fans here?
We'll put the link there.
Yeah. Any Oasis fans. But Jason was diagnosed when he was 3. I was diagnosed when I was 24. Both black people from working class backgrounds. And we're just like, both experiences are just mad because it's just it's too much. And like, how are we supposed to be able to come as we are? Nirvana reference there. We wanted to call the book Come As You Are. We weren't able to do it anyway. That's a whole other story. But in the book, and similar to what your question is, Georgie, one of the things we talk about is, yes, we can look at race and class, location, postcode lotteries when it comes to care and neurodiversity. All those things are really important. But one thing that we have to remember is none of us are free until we're all free. Nothing about us without us. So yes, you're a white woman from middle class background from London.
Yeah.
So your experience of neurodiversity is going to be very different to mine. But there are things, there is solidarity across difference, and there are lots of things that we will have in common that are similar. And a lot of what we say in the book is that, yes, managing neurodiversity in such an ableist world within families, with children, it can be so difficult, can be so isolating. But we're really calling for a kind of multi-ethnic and multi-classed unification around neurodiversity. So I can sit and talk to you about how races and how ableism like coalesce together. And I want to keep doing that. But I also want to say, I need to talk to you, or we need to talk about our similarities as well, because we're all in this society together.
Yeah. And I guess what I wanted to ask next is, how is that, you know, including myself, right? All of us that were like, for instance, women, let's just take all women who are diagnosed much later than boys, right? There's a lot of addiction that happens with these girls who are undiagnosed. Yeah. And I've always kind of suspected that a lot of my addiction was self-medicating, because I just couldn't understand why I got overwhelmed at everything, and why when I had a line of Coke, my mind would shut up. Yeah. You know? And all of my friends were like paranoid and jittery. And I was like, oh, this is what normal feels like. And I kept doing it for years and years and years. And thank God that I'm not doing it now. But is there a sort of correlation between the two? There must be, right? About addictions happening in women that don't get diagnosed with ADHD.
Yeah, I mean, like, let's just speak for myself as an ADHDer. The things that alcohol and drugs gave me was a kind of a sense of peace, but it wasn't actually peace in social life, in amongst friends, family, relationships, partners. It gave me, it turned off the noise, as you say. It turned off my mind. Like, my mind is the thing. My mind is the final boss of my healing journey. Yeah, the mind, like switching off the mind and being present. That is what I always struggled with. And I think, as we said earlier on, ADHD often occurs or begins to happen in childhood and as a result of trauma, as a result of childhood experiences of the family, etc. Very not enough evidence around the biological or genetic factors, although we know it's family, it runs through families. But again, social and environmental factors are really the key points here. So I am a black mixed race woman. I grew up in, first of all, the Medway towns in Kent, and then in a place called Bromsgrove in Worcestershire. And I think about where my drinking started as a young 13-year-old in the park with my white girlfriends, but like I have so many fond memories of those times because we had some really great times together. But one of the reasons why I was definitely drinking that was different, I think, to my friends is that I felt incredibly isolated by being the only black mixed race person within my kind of peer group, and there wasn't many black people around when I was growing up. So like booze gave me an escape. It gave me a kind of a confidence, and it also kind of numbed the feeling of longing and want to have kind of other black people around me. Like I'm now very, very spiritual, and I believe that there is a spirit, well, in a kind of black Pan-Africanist way, there is a spiritual connection between black people. And I think that when you are taken away from other black people, you have a kind of longing and a desire to be around similarity in that way. I don't want to speak for all black people. Maybe not all black people have it, but I know I do, and I know there's a tradition of people that do say similar things to what I'm saying. So that's what booze did for me. It gave me a sense of calmness, and it numbed life for me. But then move on to getting into my kind of 20s, what drugs started to give me was something else, control. Yeah. It gave me control. So it gave me the confidence. So booze was giving me the confidence, but like sometimes I could be scatty and angry because I got the ADHD and it's not under control. But then drugs, okay, I can be like happy and on point and actually like mix with people in a way that is productive. So yeah, I think for my recovery journey, what I've seen is that substances and alcohol was a way of dealing with social life, but also a way of escaping myself and not being present.
So like, I was really interested when you said spiritual, because the spiritual aspect is so important. I've tried to get sober, like being a hard line, like, no, that's it. There's just what we can see in front of us. Forget it, right? I don't want to talk to you. But that was a really great way to keep using, right? When you just like ignore all the suggestions. But I think it's really important that you have that connection. You know, you were longing for a sense of belonging and connection with people who are on the same spiritual plane as you in some way. And I think it doesn't have to look like a particular brand of religion. And that's what I really like, is that, you know, it comes in all different shapes and sizes, all different colors. And I used to think, oh, well, they're trying to push Jesus and God down my neck, and I just don't want to do that. But really, it could be like good, orderly direction or any of the other higher power type situations. And then I don't know if you've noticed, but the beautiful synchronicities that start happening when you embrace that side of you is beautiful, right? I met somebody who's very close to you, and she sent me you, and look, here we are. And that just like, boom, fell into my lap, because I am connected with whatever the heck is going on up there or there or there. I don't know, maybe in here. So yeah, really, really resonate with you on that. And you have a podcast.
Yes.
You have a podcast, and you've done many, many, many hundreds of episodes, right? So do you ever have trouble concentrating when people are talking to you?
Yeah, big time. Like, it's an issue. My producer, big up Georgia for it, Ado, like, he knows me so well, in that ideally I need to record in the morning. Ideally I need to record when I haven't eaten. And now, as time's gone on, doing a full hour is a struggle for me. And especially because on our podcast, we've mainly interviewed academics about their research, and we've tried to interview academics globally now that do research on kind of global inequalities, race, class, nation, how to make society a better place as well, is what a lot of the academics who've been on our podcast talk about. But academics aren't always the easiest to talk to, and at times it can be challenging, because the way you're trained as an academic is to kind of write and speak and produce in a very particular way. And it's not a way that I feel I've ever felt comfortable with as an ADHDer, which is one of the reasons why kind of Surviving Society came about. We wanted to create something that was like different, a different way of communicating research. So yeah, man, like speaking for an hour, like is, but you know what? Can I say something? Right. Being on a video podcast, I've not been on many yet. I feel more stimulated. But I don't know if that's my ego and being vain.
Do you mean stimulated badly? Or?
No, in a good way, which
too.
means I'm more awake. And like, obviously I'm used to, I only do audio.
Yeah.
We're moving to do more video now, but I feel more stimulated. So actually, you might have cracked the code with the podcasting as an ADHD. Yeah, maybe it does. Video helps.
Yes,
Yeah.
well, come to this studio and we can sort something out for you. Yeah. But yeah, it is true. Actually, I feel like I remember in the pandemic when I was doing my meetings, online through Zoom, I would just be zoning out. Like I would be, there's the person talking, and then there I am. There's, oh look, there's a flower outside the window.
Yeah, Zoom and Teams, I struggle with massively, and obviously a lot of our work lives now are hybrid, and I have to be really careful when I talk about this because for a lot of the disabled community in particular, hybrid working has changed people's lives.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that is incredible. And I'm so grateful that we're finally thinking about work in an inclusive way. Or some people are actioning it. There's still a lot of work to do. Anyway, I say that also to say, for me as an ADHD, the screen is an issue. And I reckon I can be on Zoom maybe for like 15 minutes and I'm gone.
Yeah.
I'm gone. Now, it might be less than that now. I'm gone. Bigger screen, having a bigger screen helps.
Yeah.
But in general, yeah.
Yeah.
It's a challenge.
It's a challenge. So, yeah, actually being in front of the camera and knowing that you're being watched is it does stimulate in a good way. It's like, yep, I'm here, I'm talking, I'm real, look.
Yeah. Do you know what's really interesting about ADHD? And again, like coming back to the kind of feminist revolution within the neurodiversity community, it's like I feel like every day I'm finding out more things about what it means to be an ADHD or like, and I think what that has gone hand in hand with for me is kind of self-love and self-acceptance, because these are things that I've been really hard on myself for. Like, I can't actually get out of bed today. Why can't I get out of bed? Oh, I'm such a lazy woman. Like, why can't I get out of bed?
Yeah.
No, like, it's an actual disability. Like, it's actually something which affects my mind and my body, which means I can't move. I think that I've still got so much to learn about ADHD. And I think that's beautiful.
Yeah, because there's always something new to learn. And I think, if we keep talking to each other as women about this issue and all the rest of them, whatever they may be, it's going to produce good results. It can't possibly produce bad, because knowledge is power, right?
Yeah.
And what does get under my skin is people telling me that it's a made up condition and it's not a disability and it's only for naughty boys.
Yeah.
And it's just, there's so little acceptance, I think, in general. I think all of the horrible men that have their little followings, I'm not going to, say his name because I don't want to give him a platform, but you know who I mean, right? Like, denying ADHD is even a thing is really damaging. And I think having a voice and saying, this is real, it affects people like this, and this, mental paralysis, physical, like not being able to get out of bed because you're overwhelmed. It's a lot.
So I really like that you brought this up, Georgie, because basically I agree with you about like 80%, and I have a slight provocation, and it's not a provocation, it's more kind of an addition to this point, right? So we're at a really exciting time where we're seeing so much more representation of neurodiversity, and it is brilliant. Like, imagine if like this representation had been around when I was a kid. Like, I think I would have been able to see myself more. Like, it's powerful. But one of the things, and Professor Arday and I tried to talk about this in our book, that we have to be careful of when it comes to this kind of work is we have to ensure that the politics remains at the heart of it. Now, what I mean by that is when we individualise neurodiversity, when we talk about it just as someone's individual issue and don't talk about it in a collective way, it can work to do a bit of kind of navel gazing. It can work to do a kind of like representation is not freedom, basically. We need structural and material changes in order to truly have an inclusive society. And sometimes I think we're at the risk of hyper representation whilst not recognising actually, like, when it comes to social care allowances, when it comes to special educational needs support in the UK, we are in a dire situation. Yeah. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, we can have a blog which tells you all the different ways in which ADHD, like, do you know what I mean? And that's not to say the blog is important, don't get me wrong, but I guess one of my fears sometimes, well, not one of my fears, and there's lots of really amazing critical voices in disability studies right now talking about this, is that like we have to get back to or ensure we're always returning to the collective, to the structural. What does it look like on a day-to-day basis? Like, how do we make change on a day-to-day basis for those that are most marginalised, for those that don't have privilege, for those that don't have cash? What can we do for those people? And we all have our different roles and we can't do everything. Your amazing role, Georgie, is one of the kind of knowledge producers in democratising conversations and hope and love and real people. That is a role, and we all have our roles to play. And I think that it's just looking at all the different other roles that other people can do as well.
Yeah, it's interesting because you were talking about did you say it's a tradition in Black feminism to educate fascists?
So I'll roll back and build the argument a bit more. I think we were talking about toxic masculinity, and we're talking about modern day gender politics. We're talking about the position of men and boys and how they feel about more concessions being given to women when it comes to equality, but we're striving for equity. And yeah, you can see how narratives or ideas about boys and men being left behind in today's society can take hold. And I guess some of the more progressive people that I would consider that I'm in kind of intellectual community with, I think at times will push those people to one side and say they don't matter, they're hateful, we shouldn't be engaging with them. And I have definitely been part of that group before. And I'm not advocating for an engagement, but I'm advocating for an understanding, and I'm advocating for the fact that none of us are free until we're all free. And I draw on here, like, one of my kind of feminist heroes, Stella Datsy. She spent a lot of time in the 90s working with white working class racist young people, helping them to not be racist.
Wow.
And like, I know that there is a lot of work like that going on across the UK. I know there's some brilliant practitioners, teachers, anti-racist advocates that don't get the flowers, and they should do, that are really trying to look at, okay, what is happening in our schools? What is happening online? Like, how is the incel movement just continuing to grow? And why are they able to recruit 11-year-olds?
Yeah.
And like, what I want to do here is really caveat this and say, look, this isn't about denouncing the position of women, and I'm always kind of thinking about, and like, women are at the bedrock, or women, trans people, non-binary people are at the bedrock of my politics, don't get me wrong, but I do believe that the people that don't see me as human or are spreading hate in a way that is able to capture children, then they're people that we shouldn't be ignoring. Should we engage with them in this way? I don't necessarily think so, but I do think we should be up for putting together a politics, a narrative, a way of being, a way of understanding the world for young people, for young boys, for adult men who are enticed by these kind of politics. Like,
yeah, so they're often like pimped out as like, you know, there's no male role models for you, so here I am. And I in my recovery have learned that when I don't agree with somebody or I don't like what someone's saying, I don't have to take it on board. Trolls don't upset me anymore, like, because in recovery I kind of learned that if somebody's treating you badly, you know, it's their stuff.
It's their stuff, yeah.
And it's only my responsibility what I do next, and my side of the street is basically a simplified version of what I'm saying. And like their side of the street is not my responsibility, right? But there is a responsibility now for me to, you know, stand up and say, like, to other girls, you don't need to put up with this. Because I was so compliant and placid and just did what I was told by a lot of partners and stuff. And I didn't even realize it until it was happening.
Yeah.
Because when I was drinking still, I didn't really care about anyone. I cared about the next drink. But when I got into relationships in recovery, I slotted right into the wifey role that was modeled for me by my mother. Now, I love my mum and she's great and she's grown. She had me very young, right? But the codependence in the home, the not asking for help, any of that, a woman's role. And when I see the 1950s being like shown as like, this is what a woman should be, it's like, no, there's lots of women. There's lots of versions that a woman can be. And when you say 11-year-olds, that's where I get a bit worried, you know? And then that, I think a lot of that leads people into addiction, the confusion. You know, who am I? Who should she be? Who should he be? Do you think the family systems is what I'm talking about, basically? So women don't drink. Women don't get drunk. A sloppy drunk woman is so unattractive, but, you know, a guy has a few beers and it's cute.
Yeah. It's interesting because I haven't got all the answers here. It's something that I think it's something that I haven't got the answers here, but I'm so curious because it's something that I'm thinking about a lot, and I'm thinking about it a lot as I develop in my own kind of self-love, self-actualization, but in my own recovery. And as I'm a widow as well, so as a single woman now that doesn't live with a man in the same way, I'm able to come back to myself and look at family systems in a way that I was not able to really look at before because I was in a relationship. And I think that I'm a big fan of Stephen Bartlett because I think that he's doing quite a lot of work in looking at masculinity on his podcast, I Have a CEO. And he asked in a recent episode to one of his guests, he asked, what is the role of men now? And I can so see how, like, who are men now? And I can so see how that position could be taken up by a variety of different men. And again, I'm not being an incel apologist here. I promise you I'm not. But I recognise that they feel lost, but their loss is not the fault of women. No. And that is like the key point. Their loss is not the fault. It's not women's fault. But I think as a society, we have to allow more space for people to come as they are, to be authentic in themselves, to be able to access an ordinary and dignified life, not at the expense of anyone else.
Yes.
And I think that the way society is set up, which is very gendered, as we know, it makes these things really difficult. It makes it really difficult. And I was talking to a good friend about this not long ago, another academic, Dr. Catherine Median. We often talk about kind of families and family systems, and she made a really important point to me that, like, if you've experienced childhood trauma or if you've experienced a kind of fractured relationship with parents, gender and the family growing up, you might strive for a nuclear setup where you have more traditional gender roles because that is a safe space for you. And like, I don't want to judge that anymore, but I think I have kind of been judgmental of it at times because I've seen the harms of patriarchy at the hands of men that are engaging solely in toxic masculinity. But that isn't the case for everyone. Like, everyone has different experiences of the family, and there are similarities. There are similarities that we can draw on. One thing that I do want to say, when it comes to patriarchy in general and sexism, and I kind of have a duty to say this as a sociologist, is it is genderless. Like, I have seen both intimately and personally how women can use patriarchy as a way to solidify their position, as a way to, solidify their position in a still very precarious and unstable world. Like, they're told that, okay, if I be the housewife, or if I am punitive or act in a particular way towards particular groups, then I'll be safe in the system.
Yeah.
I think it's really complicated, all of it, but I'm really glad that we're having these conversations. And it's easy for me to ignore like the far right. It's really because I don't have them in my intimate community or personal life, but I'm a public sociologist. I'm someone that's doing the work on myself. I'm someone that is able to feel okay in myself if someone doesn't agree with me to that extent. And that's a new thing for me as well. That's a new thing. So actually I need to step into this more and have those uncomfortable conversations in the hope of finding, peace, solace, solidarity across difference. Not solidarity of incels, I just want to be clear there.
I don't think anyone would think you meant that. One more question. May I have one more question?
Of course.
Oh, thank you. Hang on a minute. I just need to remember what it was. See, ADHD. Fuck.
Yeah.
All right. What advice would you give someone who thinks that they hear a lot of what we're saying and they're like, oh God, that's me, and they're already through the door of self-medicating to full-on addiction? Is there a way that that could get them well? Because for me, I would say sometimes the medical detox is necessary because it's very dangerous to stop drinking cold turkey, or stop any drug really. But not everyone can afford rehab. That's like a tiny % of people can afford rehab. There are funded rehabs, but the waiting lists are ridiculous. So what resources would you say off the top of your head?
So I think it's a really important question, and I think this is all very class, and it's a class politics. I think the extent to which people are able to access help very much depends on the resources they have at their disposal, and that is a really sad reality. However, as we know, fellowships and meetings are very much available globally now. So wherever you live, like looking up the different meetings and fellowships that might be available. And even if you're not sober, or even if you're not even committed to recovery yet, just going with someone that you trust or going on your own, I think is a really powerful thing. I think that, again, like, I'm not an expert on recovery at all, nor am I an expert on addiction. I am an addict.
Me too.
But I'm not. I'm curious about how more people can heal and access the healing journey, because I think it is beautiful, and I know so many people don't get to do that. I take my late husband, for example. Like, I think every day about how much I wish he could have accessed the healing journey of sobriety. Advice. I think knowing that everything you need is here. Is within yourself. Like, everything you need is within yourself, but also the power of people and community as well. When I grew up, I didn't necessarily have a community that I fully felt at peace and comfortable with, and now I can say as an adult that I have many more people around me that I feel a kind of sense of solace when I'm in their company. And I'm not kind of on edge, and that very much helps my sobriety and recovery journey. I think really things like journaling, like looking at yourself, talking to yourself, writing to yourself, being in nature, meditation. Now, as an ADHDer, it took me a long time to get into meditation.
Tell me about it.
But meditation is a key part of my daily practices now. Yoga was a really important part of my recovery journey. And I think just being around, like, so when I first... Sorry, can we talk about AA? We can't say.
No.
Yeah, we can't say. Yeah.
So, but we can say recovery groups or 12-step fellowship.
Yeah. So when I first started to be in community with other people that were in recovery, I couldn't believe how many people had a similar mind to me.
Yes.
And that in itself was such a key part of my own recovery. Just being around other, and I'd never been like, I'm a black mixed race woman. I've been around other black people. There's certain like things around blackness which gives me a kind of comfort, but it doesn't necessarily mean we have the addict mind. Like having the addict mind is like a multi-ethnic, multi-class. Like there's it's all shapes and sizes. Yeah. But that kind of experience of being around someone that's got a similar mind to me was incredible.
Yeah, because it's like we do think differently to most other people, you know, and it was described to me perfectly in one of the first places I got well, was that it is it's an infant-like mind who's easily frustrated, easily angered, and cannot accept the word no. Yeah. Controlling. Yeah. Can be manipulative. Oh, yeah. Sensitive. But incredibly loving. If it's channeled properly, right?
Yeah, it's incredibly loving and beautiful and funny. Addicts, I'm sorry, addicts are the funniest people. Addicts in recovery are like the most hilarious people. Like,
and then I did a wee on the tube.
Yeah. Like the funniest people. Yeah.
Okay, listen, thank you so much. And I just would like to ask you one more thing about your book.
Yes.
So the book, when's it coming out? And what's it called again?
So I've got one co-authored book with my good friend and amazing public sociologist, Professor Jason Arday. That's called We See Things They'll Never See, Love, Hope and Neurodiversity. That's out in the autumn of 2025. And then my own book, my own solo author book, which is called Family, Making the Unconventional Conventional Through Radical Love, will be forthcoming in 2026, 2027 times. Yeah.
Okay, great. Well, I'm going to get a copy of all of that. So thank you so much. I'm going to be digesting this for the rest of the day, but it's been so helpful, and thank you for being so open with me.
Thank you, Georgina.
And I think that brings this episode to a close.